Hi, Boomer.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I was wondering whether or not you're going to show up this morning after all that partying you probably did last night after that big win.
We had a parade, actually. Yep. I mean, you impressed with Mac Jones, or was that a meh for you yesterday?
You know, when he got hurt against Baltimore, I told you guys a long time ago that I thought that he should stay out and make sure that he's 100%. And I'm sure that Coach Belichick and internally there was a lot of pressure for him to get back on the field last week. I didn't think he looked right last week. I think he looked better this week than he did last week. And I could certainly tell you that he looked a hell of a lot better than Zach Wilson did yesterday. So, coming out of yesterday's game, give me Mac Jones every day over Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson was terrible, made a lot of bad decisions, as you guys saw, and basically gave the game away to the Patriots.
Yeah, how many weeks does Zach Wilson have left, would you say, with the New York Jets?
It's hard to say, but I was telling one of our board ops here, Mike Fliegelman, who is a huge Jet fan, and he's so disgusted this morning. I was saying, in Buffalo, 2 years into Josh Allen's career, people were booing him. People didn't know whether or not he was going to be any good. I could say the same thing about Tua Tagovailoa down in Miami. And I would also say the same thing about Zach Wilson. There are things that Zach does on the field. You're like, wow, he can really do it. He can really play. He's got a great arm. But then it's the decision-making when he breaks the pocket where everything breaks down around him as a quarterback. So he's played really bad football for 4 weeks in a row right now. What made this game worse than the previous 4 games is the fact that he threw the interceptions. And the interceptions were the game. And quite frankly, I think the Jets got screwed on 2 different plays. One was the interception return for a touchdown because while Franklin Myers does launch himself, there's no penalty in the NFL that says launching in it. You have to hit a guy up around the head and neck area. I didn't think he did that to Mac Jones. And then, of course, the C.J. Mosley tackle on Mac Jones, where not only does Mac Jones stay in the game, I don't know what the person that's up in the box was looking at. But C.J. Mosley gets penalized for a hit that he should have never gotten penalized for.
Agree. I hate it. Pains me to say it, but I agree.
A weird move, too, by Zach Wilson after the game to go and say, yeah, we'll see those guys in 2 weeks. It's like, I don't understand what he was thinking there to give them any type of bulletin board material when they see each other so soon.
I think, Courtney, I need to give a class on quarterback 101 and how to handle the media, because when you have such a disastrous game as he did yesterday, you get up there in front of the media and you take accountability for that. And you say, and he tried to do this, and then he kind of expanded his thoughts a little bit, and it just made it worse. Just be simple. I made bad reads. I made bad plays. I made bad decisions. I cost my team the game. And the reason I say that that's important, especially in today's day and age with social media, is that whatever you say is going to go viral, no matter what, especially when you play as poorly as he did. That means your teammates, your coaches, your owner, everybody involved with the organization sees how you react in the face of adversity. And facing adversity like Mac Jones has faced over the last couple of weeks is a big part of becoming an NFL quarterback and overcoming that adversity. And I would say what came out of his mouth yesterday was a little bit startling for many of us who have played the position and watched how he handled it.
Speaking of quarterback 101, do you speak Rodgers, Boomer?
I don't really, but, he's on a different planet than I am. I actually feel bad for him. My son is a huge Packers fan, Greg, and Gunnar and I are texting back and forth last night, and I said, I've been on teams like he's on right now. And I know I wasn't making $50 million. I would take the abuse back then if I were making $50 million a year. But where they can't protect and they really have nobody to throw to, and you got to use other players in different positions like their running backs and their tight ends like he was trying to use last night. Even Josh Allen last night made 2 just unconscionable interceptions, and he reverted back to when he was a rookie. And I'm sure he's kicking himself in the ass this morning because of it. But I feel bad. I do feel bad for Aaron Rodgers, although I do know that he goes to the bank today and probably puts in about $2.5 million.
Well, when he says, heading into this week, it's a good thing for us to be exposed. What does that mean?
I think he was talking about the exposure on Sunday Night Football. That's. I believe me, I listened to this quote about 100 times this week. That we're going to be exposed on Monday Night Football. That we're the only game in town. Everybody's going to see us, and hopefully that's going to raise everybody's level of intensity. And you got to have players. I mean, you can see he's throwing the ball to Romeo Doubs, and Romeo looks like he'll be an okay player. I don't think he's going to be a difference maker for them. But, everybody that he had been throwing to over the last few years is either hurt or out of there. So it's not just that. They have a problem at left guard, or it was a right guard. Right, I think it's left guard. And he was getting steamrolled all night too. So it's almost impossible for him to play. And I can't sit here and say that it's his fault. I can tell you that the Packers made a calculated error thinking that Aaron Rodgers was so good that he can make everybody else around him so much better.
Boomer, if you are going to teach a class, the first course everybody should take should be Intro to Decision Making. So take us into the head a little bit of a quarterback. How much of the decision making is the quarterback understanding and knowing the situation, or how much of it is the coaches constantly reminding the quarterback not to make bad decisions? Here's the right decision.
I was lucky when I got drafted in Cincinnati. Sam Weish was our new head coach. He had come over from the San Francisco 49ers. He was the quarterback coach to Joe Montana. He had also played in the NFL. Kenny Anderson was in that room. The backup quarterback was Turk Schonert in that room. And Bruce Coslet was my offensive coordinator. And Sam was the quarterback coach as well as the head coach. They taught me everything I needed to know about the game and what my responsibilities were in order to be an effective player. And when we were together for about 7 years, we were virtually unstoppable offensively. And all I know is that I had to know every situation. I had to know every formation. I had to know every personnel group. There were no quarterback to coach conversation pieces. It was all done by hand signals, and it was up to you as a player to have the intuition and the understanding of the game to make the right decisions. Now, sometimes you make the wrong decisions for different reasons, but I would just say that you have to coach a player and to find out if he can play quarterback in the NFL, if he's tough enough to handle the criticisms that come his way. And I remember Bruce Coslet was very, very tough on me and would hold me accountable after every game. And he would talk about arm strength. He would talk about, accuracy. He would talk about manipulating the pocket. He would talk about understanding where we are in the game and what the situation was. I mean, I was schooled up constantly in a room and an environment that brought the best out of me. So the older I got, the more I realized just how important they were to my success early in my career. And I like what Brian Daboll is doing with Daniel Jones down here for the Giants. He's in his face. Now, they had a tough game yesterday, but you know what? Daniel Jones didn't turn the ball over. And one of the problems Daniel Jones has had his previous 3 years, he's always turning the ball over. And the Giants were entering the fourth quarter down. Well, that has ended now. He is finally figuring that part of it out. So that's the big thing for me with these young quarterbacks, not to throw these bad interceptions. By the way, Mac would have thrown a bad interception yesterday that would have been returned for a touchdown had it not been called back. But the first interception is not his fault. I mean, that's just basically a guy getting beat on the defensive line by the defensive lineman and the ball getting knocked up in the air. So those things happen.
Boomer, with the trade deadline tomorrow, what's this week like for a player? And do you see the Patriots making any big moves?
Yeah, everybody's talking about the Patriots having this plethora of wide receivers and maybe guys like Nelson Aguilar would get traded. Now, with the injury yesterday to that position, I don't know whether or not the Patriots would dive into making a trade. I do know out there that there are players like Chase Claypool that if the Steelers feel like, he's not fitting what they're doing and their season is basically a wash right now and they're just trying to get Kenny Pickett up to speed, maybe he gets traded for a third-round pick. But I would think that there'll be teams that come out of yesterday's games, maybe with some injuries, and they'll start scouring. The problem with right now at the NFL, when I look at the standings and everything else, I mean, the Atlanta Falcons are in first place in the NFC South, and the Seattle Seahawks are in first place in the NFC West. And you say to yourself, wait a minute, time out. These teams are not supposed to be there, and they're there because other teams are going through transition too. So, I mean, if you are like a team that's on the cusp like the Bears were before yesterday's game against Cowboys, and you trade Robert Quinn, a captain and a defensive leader in the locker room, you're going to get the performance that you got from the Bears yesterday because I think the players are saying, okay, this GM and this coach now are going to be cherry-picking the players that they want to stay here. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a few of these teams make some moves that feel that they're out of it, but I also know that there are a couple teams that didn't think they would be in it this deep into the season that probably are going to hold off.
Your guy, Nate, said yesterday that Tom Brady made a mistake coming back this season. Do you agree?
I don't. Listen, he's got all the personal issues on top of all of this, and I don't know if that was the impetus for the divorce and everything like that. That's his personal life. I don't know. I still think he's got plenty of football left to be played, and I wouldn't be, would I be surprised if he said he was going to come back for one more year? You know what I think that team misses? I just feel like watching them under Todd Bowles, and I've said this last week, so I'm not saying anything new today. I just like his personality. Todd is just a laid-back kind of guy, and he doesn't get in the face of anybody. I always felt like Bruce Arians had an edge, and he would come down on Tom Brady as much as he would come down on everybody else, and it would be public between he and Tom Brady, and it got the best out of everybody. Like, he was on the sideline, he was on edge, the team was on edge. I don't see that same kind of activity from Todd Bowles. I feel like this team has taken on the personality of the head coach, which is more of a laid-back kind of personality, which I think in general hurts the team, especially when the quarterback's the one that's got to do all the screaming at everybody.
Boomer, you talked about the trade deadline and where teams may be. Put your Patriots GM hat on. If you're the Patriots and you start to look, do you become a buyer or a seller based on where you are in the standings, or so I think that's the biggest thing when you look at this Patriots team.
I know they're 4-4, and they're outside the playoffs right now. And it's a long, long season. And the next couple of weeks, I think they should be favored to win their games against the Colts and the Jets, respectively. I just, Bill likes his draft picks. He really does. And I know he doesn't like to get rid of those draft picks, and that's usually what other teams are looking for. He may end up trading one of his own players just to make a statement within the locker room to get more out of some other players, maybe. I just don't necessarily know that they're going to add. I really don't. He doesn't really come across as a guy that is going to be all that active and really hasn't been all that active in a situation like this. So I think, Wiggy, I wouldn't be surprised if they just stand pat and play with what they got, and hopefully Mac Jones gets healthier as the season unfolds here.
Question of the week for Boomer Esiason is brought to you by McFarland Energy, the always reliable HVAC and home oil delivery pros at McFarlandEnergy.com. Halfway point of the season, Boomer, biggest overachiever, biggest underachiever?
Well, probably the biggest overachiever is got to be the New York Giants. I mean, they're 5-2. Nobody expected them to be here, and that's why, or 6-2, I should say. And Brian Daboll is a tremendous coach, and he's brought out the best in his quarterback. And I would say it's got to be the New York Giants, and I would put them in there with the Seattle Seahawks, because both of those teams, are far ahead of where anybody thought in the big picture of things. I think the Indianapolis Colts are a disappointment at 3-4. I would say the Vegas Raiders at 2-5 are also a huge disappointment, as is Russell Wilson. So there's three big disappointments for you right there in the AFC, and unfortunately for Frank in Indianapolis. That was an awful loss yesterday to Dan Snyder's Washington Commanders. Imagine that. Dan Snyder in the building with Jim Irsay. Jim Irsay 2 weeks ago basically saying he wants Dan Snyder out of ownership at Washington, and Washington goes in there and wins a game late in the game. That had to be pretty satisfying for Mr. Snyder.
The defense yesterday for the Patriots, it seems like they're kind of a Jekyll and Hyde, and Matthew Judon after the game kind of said the same thing, that they can't let the monster in. Who do you think this defense is? They were able to turn it around on a short week, but in your mind going forward, who are they?
Well, they're going to be good over the next 2 weeks because of who they're playing. So they're going to be playing Sam Ehlinger. Who? What? Yeah, so they're going to play him at quarterback next week. So their numbers are going to be, they should be good. They should be able to get a couple turnovers. They'll have to stop Jonathan Taylor, assuming he's healthy. I think there's somewhere – I think they're a top 10 defense. I really do. I think that's what keeps them in these games. And as long as, they get the positive side of the turnover differential, they're going to win more than they lose. I still think that they're somewhere between like a 10-7, 9-8 type of team, which could be just good enough to get them in the playoffs as a wild card team.
All right, Boomer, what kind of candy are you handing out tonight?
You know what? I'm actually doing the Manningcast tonight.
Oh,
wow.
Yes, yeah. It's Cincinnati at Cleveland. So I think I'll be on in the second quarter, I believe.
All right. Well, we have one Halloween wish. Somehow you got to drop the Greg Hill show on the Manningcast.
Yes.
Somehow I have to drop the Greg Hill show on the Manningcast, and the fact that he won a Marconi and was walking around trying to pick up chicks with it.
Right. If you can slide that in, it would be helpful. It would really help.
Yeah. So my friend Greg Hill was traipsing around New York City like he had just won the Super Bowl, holding up that Marconi trophy. It was very interesting, Greg. I have to tell you.
Boomer, I was going right to the train station afterward. What would I do with it? What would I do with it?
Leave it with our boss who was with you too.
What would I do with it?
I was just thinking you got it the night before, and I figured that you went out and partied with it the night before. I could see you at One Oak here, and have it right on the desk, and people going, "What's that, man? That's your lord." They bring them in.
All right, great to talk to you. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks.
Okay,
Boomer.
guys, have a great week. See ya.